Get started. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope everyone is enjoying the new year. We are going to get started, but before we do, this call will be recorded and posted to our website. So just want to make sure you guys are all aware of that, as per usual, every single time. It's good to see you all. I haven't seen you since last year. Very funny. So today I'm going to highlight some updates on our office, followed by progress on the BEAD program. Then I'll turn it over to Diane Lowe to talk about NBEAD and give everyone a preview of the portal. Finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. I'd like everyone to hold their questions until the end. And feel free to drop questions at any time in the chat, and we'll make sure to address them at that Q&A time. So you might notice a new face on our team. I'm excited to introduce everyone to Deidre Boyle, our new outreach coordinator. Welcome, Deidre. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Patrick. Hi, everyone. I'm Deidre Boyle, and I'm really excited to be joining the Nebraska Broadband Office as the outreach coordinator. It feels great being back working for the state of Nebraska. For the past about 4.5 years, I've been working with another state agency as their marketing outreach coordinator. So I'm excited to take that experience and putting it into this role with the broadband office. I'm looking forward to working with some of you or all of you and happy to assist wherever I can. So excited and thrilled to be joining the team. Thanks.
I might just add, Patrick, that for the first time in the history of the office's history, we are fully staffed at the Nebraska Broadband Office.
Yes, we are fully staffed. We have a full team now, so very excited. So the faces you see are the faces you're going to see, hopefully here on out. And no new changes, please, team. But thank you, Deidre. We're excited to have her on board. And as Patrick said, we're excited to be fully staffed. And speaking of her position as outreach coordinator, our office has been busy despite the holiday season. Early in December, Director Haggerty testified in front of the TNT committee to introduce, highlighting how we have reduced the number of reported under and unserved locations in Nebraska by about 60 to 75%, respectively. Most of that is thanks to our ISPs here who stepped up in either private investments or accepting other enforceable commitments. So thank you very much for that. We greatly appreciate our partnership with you all. We also, in the same vein as outreach, we also hosted a booth at the annual NACO conference and engaged a number of county officials about the impact of broadband coming to their communities. Additionally, like I said, we're very busy. Additionally, Director Haggerty attended
and went over to Barner Hall
NTA last month at their annual conference. Please mute until question and answers time. So moving on to the challenge process. Now for the exciting news. So we finally did receive NTA approval last month in December of 2024. So it took some time on our challenge process. So all of that is set in stone. We have our inventory set now. This solidifies all the locations in which we were able to apply BEAD funding to. So I just want to, as a sidebar, say a quick thank you to everybody that participated. We had a lot of great responses with that. Whether you are a nonprofit or local government office advocating for your constituents or an ISP working to ensure the map is accurately reflected your work, thank you, thank you, thank you. We could not have done it without you. We received thousands of challenges, which resulted in our office reviewing data of nearly 100,000 locations to kind of put that in perspective exactly what happened during this challenge process. We also went through, at the end of that, what NTA refers to as a true-up, where we updated to a newer version of the FCC fabric. At the end of all of that, at the end of functionally the last 9 months, we now have a total of 29,597 locations eligible for BEAD funding. So fantastic, huge decrease from the 105 back in June of 2023 for those of you that were here during that. You can find the results posted on our website on our challenge page. Many of you have been emailing us as you are seeing locations that might already be serviced that were not reflected in the outcome of the challenge process. NTA has outlined another process of how to work through some exceptions. There's always another process. Director Haggerty, could you walk us through how that would work?
Yeah, for sure. First, I want to go back and reemphasize a statistic that Patrick had commented on regarding our annual report to the legislature, and that is a reduction over the last year in unserved locations of 75%, underserved locations by 60%. That's almost unbelievable in a year's time, and many of you on this call are responsible for that. So again, I want to extend a lot of gratitude towards that. It's going to make position Bede at least in a much more better position to be successful in allocating funds for the remaining 29,597. So thank you for that. I also want to, I guess as we go on to the next slide, maybe Rachel, just because it's a good visual, or Patrick, talk a little bit about the primary questions I'm getting into the office after having posted our defined project areas. Most of you have seen that, but the one question that has, or concern that has come in, and I've spoke to many of you about it, but worthwhile bringing up for those of you that haven't, is the exceptions to that. There's already, been several calls identifying primarily locations that are served, but are showing as inventory within our defined project areas. NTIA has given guidance to all 56 states and territories regarding how we're going to procedurally handle those. And I would just start by saying it's at the end of the process and then kind of work backwards from there. The one statement I think stands out to me in terms of the most directive from NTIA is that this inventory we now have and is reflected on our defined project area map will decrease the number of broadband serviceable locations, but will never increase. So we can take away from the locations we've got identified, but we can never add to the locations we have identified. And I think that's a pretty definitive statement that says a lot. The process in which we're going to reduce those locations that we identify as exceptions to the map, such as already currently being served, or even an exception in regards to an enforceable commitment. And I just saw a question come in. Yes, the slide will be posted on our website. But the process NTIA has set up is a process to, at the end of the build, at the end of the project completion, we will submit a file confirming that every BSL in that defined project area has been addressed. Either it's had network constructed to it to change it from unserved or underserved to served, or we've in fact identified an exception. And NTIA has provided a list of exception codes that I think is pretty comprehensive in regards to the reality of the circumstances we'll find out there. But the one that's coming most common is a location that's been served or is shortly going to be served either through private funding or subsidy that's showing up on our map as a fundable location. The exception code for that, just by way of example, I think it's helpful, is exception code number 5. It does not have a subcode associated with it, but the code itself is identified or is described as location is already served by non-subsidized service, privately funded network. It will then ask us to provide evidence that we have collected related to substantiate that confirmation. The evidence, or again, by way of example in that regard, is evidence of a subscription or a bill, customer bill, photographic evidence of infrastructure, network diagram, speed test, attestation from the provisional awardee that it concurs to not accept a BEAD project for that location. So there's a number of those type of exceptions. Again, we will follow up throughout the process on those identifications. We will collect that information, and at the end of the project completion, we will submit a file that reflects those exceptions if in fact they fall within a project area. How we're going to do that is throughout the process. As you all, as the providers know, any subgrantee initiating a contract through the Nebraska Broadband Office to receive funding will agree to field monitoring. The frequency of that is going to be determined based on some risk analysis that will occur during the organizational assessment, but nonetheless, you'll see our folks in the field frequently. As we're in the field, and I think Patrick's going to introduce our consultant here shortly, but as we're in the field, we will collect that information from the subgrantee and retain it here in the office for the final file that we then again submit back to the NTIA to confirm that we've done what we said we were going to do and how much we spent doing it. But with that, I think we can accept some questions at the end of it. Hopefully that's helpful to a lot of you that haven't called the office and gotten that response prior to. But nonetheless, we're aware of it. I think we're really close to perfect on our map, but we knew we wouldn't be perfect. And we appreciate the calls to the office identifying that.
All right, thanks for the breakdown, Director Haggerty. As Director Haggerty was mentioning on our DPAs, I've now moved to that slide. And this is really the meat and potatoes of our discussion today. The defined project areas, or as we've said multiple times, the DPAs. If you haven't looked at it already, you can find a link to them on our homepage. Just go ahead and click on that. It should take you to a separate application or separate map application there. If it is asking you to sign in, by the way, then that's a browser issue. It shouldn't be doing that. So I would recommend maybe open up a different window or different browser at that point. In creating these DPAs, we use an optimization tool to break the nearly 30,000 locations into 233 DPAs. Since we believe we have enough funding to cover both the under and unserved locations, we are not distinguishing between the two of them. They are all considered BEAD eligible. All locations within a DPA need to be addressed in the application. There's no slicing and dicing going on here. DPAs were designed to balance out some of the most cost-attractive locations with some more costly locations. That was intentional. So you will be seeing some outliers that will need to be included in the application. Our goal as an office, as stated multiple times, both in presentations and in our documents to NTA and also to all of you, is that we are looking to maximize fiber across the state, as is the entire BEAD program. That doesn't mean that we're excluding anyone that doesn't do fiber, but that's kind of our goal here. You'll notice a few areas on the DPA map, which I'll be getting to in just a little bit, are a little bit different than these kind of hexagonal shapes. 5 of those are NTIA designated high cost areas. We have more flexibility with those DPAs on that 25% match component because of NTIA determined demographics in those locations. So everywhere else, other than those 5 specifically, we are held to that 25% match pending any waiver, but in those locations, there's a lot more flexibility on that 25% match. I'm not NTA, don't ask me how they determined that, go ask them, but that is the lay of the land on that one. There are 2 other DPAs that we'll be seeing in just a minute that also look a little bit stranger than the rest of the DPAs. And those are tribal lands. So we have 2 specifically, that's Omaha and Winnebago. And we are doing this because the tribes must provide consent on any provider selected for that DPA. So we thought bundling them together would be the most streamlined approach for both the tribes and eligible applicants. And we want to make sure we do it that way to recognize their sovereignty over their homelands. That said, we have ended up having 14 BSLs in total across the 2 tribal lands. There's 6 in Omaha and 8 in Winnebago. If a potential applicant is interested in applying for those DPAs, we strongly recommend and highly encourage you to begin to work with these tribal entities now. Do not wait until the PA opens or even the OA opens. We recommend you call them like today, basically, because there's going to be a significant amount of work that will need to be done to secure that consent if you are going to secure that consent. So that is my recommendation. We want this process to work as smoothly as possible for everyone involved, both the applicants and then those being served by the applicants. That said, if you're trying to navigate our DPA map, it's actually rather simple in the way that we've set it up, which kudos to the team, by the way, are both our team, High Street, as well as NDOT's team. This is, I think, very intelligent the way that they've done this. So imagine a grid across the map, as you can see here in the presentation. From left to right, it goes A to Z, and then from top to bottom, it goes 10 in the 10 slot is kind of what we're looking at here, all the way down to 9 in the 10 slot. So the reason that I say that specifically is if we focus our attention down to kind of this cluster down here. So this is what we call the LMN cluster. So you see a lot of DPAs that are generally around here. The reason I say it's in the 10 slot specifically is because if you're looking from top to bottom, you go L71, L72, L74. Those are all still in that L, L kind of column over here, but is in the 7th row. But from top to bottom, they go 1, 2, 4. So that kind of gives you that understanding of why specifically they're numbered in that way. It just gives us an instant reference to what DPA you're talking about. So you don't have to say, oh, it's the purple DPA that's over by kind of Kearney. Like, you don't need to tell us that. It's L72. Okay, we know exactly where that is. We know that that's over by that kind of Tri-City area. So that's really why we went around doing that. And as another example, if you're looking for like DPA T73, then you'll find it down here on the right bottom of the map. So right here, T73. And if you're looking for, let's say, D22, you'll find that all the way up here. And I can just instantly look for those. And I have them here in my notes, but I actually didn't look at where they were beforehand. So you can just kind of see exactly how quickly we were able to kind of find those. So it should work really well for both the office and answering questions and working with our applicants, as well as for the applicants and kind of understanding where all of these locations are. So I'm sure you guys are all tired of listening to me. I will be now turning it over to our Budget and Finance Director, Diane Lowe, to give everyone a look into our next steps for the upcoming application process. Diane, the floor is yours.
If I could interrupt real quickly, Patrick,
Sure.
just before we leave the DPAs, there was a strategic intent in posting those as early as we did. And as Diane gets into describing the organizational application process, I would just, for the providers or interested applicants on the call, I encourage you to really start doing your analysis on those DPAs now. As we get into the OA and the PA process, it's going to move, our intent is to move that very quickly. So again, just some encouragement that that was posted intentionally early to give you all time to begin working on where your interests lie now.
Yes, absolutely. Please, the point of this, and you can find a lot of information on how all this is going to run both in this presentation and then also in our volume 2 that's posted on our website right now. So start collecting that information, start looking at your maps, download the information from our website, come up with a strategic plan for you, do all of that kind of stuff like now. We do not want to be slowing down this process, you know, at any point really. We want to be getting this out as quickly as possible and still do it right. And for our NTA people that are in this call, we want to do it right, and we want to do it everything by the book. So we're not going to rush through anything that will impinge upon that, but we do want to move very quickly. So Diane Lowe, now the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I assume you can hear me. Nobody's waving at me. Will you go to the next slide, please? Okay, for those, excuse me, who have been on our town halls before and listened to me a little bit, or for those who are brand new to it, this is just a quick terminology revisit. We use a lot of acronyms. This is government work, so we speak an acronym. So here's just a quick rundown of the key ones we're using today, or I'll be using today. You've already seen DPA. NBED is the Nebraska version of BEAD. That's the name we've given it. NBO, if you're not familiar, Nebraska Broadband Office. The RFA, OA, Organizational Application, PA, Project Application. We go to the next slide. So I'm going to introduce you to two sets of folks that have been absolutely essential in getting our program up and running. And the first is JEO Consulting. They have been brought in to assist us with performance and compliance engineer monitoring, the NEPA stuff. Oh my gosh, I love them just for that. And the grants management piece of things. They're not going to speak today, but they are with us. So the second is Submittable, and Submittable is the grants management software company that we are working with, and that's what we're going to explore in my session here in a couple of minutes today. Will you go to the next? Okay, questions and communication. At this point and from here moving forward, we are in need of your help and assistance and your cooperation, please. We are working to ensure fairness to all potential applicants, and we need to avoid even the appearance of impropriety because people get really cranky about it. So if you have a question, bearing in mind that if you ask a question about the PA right now, I'm going to wait till we get to the PA stage to answer it because we've got other questions coming in on other topics right now. So we will reserve the right to answer questions in appropriate stages. From now until we release the RFA, send your questions to that email address there is a little dark for this background, but it does say nbo.grants@nebraska.gov, and you'll see it on other slides. You can send your questions there. Please watch our FAQs that are posted on our website. That will be updated as things come in, as we think of things that we want to make sure you guys are aware of. Bearing in mind that there are limits to answers that we can provide. Again, linked to timing, but also there are some things that I just cannot answer in this forum. Please go to the next. During the OA submission period, that window, all of your questions need to be submitted in writing to that email address. We will post the answers to the FAQs document within 2 business days of receipt of those questions. Bearing in mind, if you submit them right at the last minute, just a day or two close to that OA deadline, you may not get the answer before you have to submit your OA. So please plan accordingly. Bearing in mind that only written responses will be binding on NBO. So if you happen to have a moment where you call me and you say, blah, blah, and I give you an answer, it doesn't count. Sorry. You know, if I'm just, oops, I shouldn't have given it to you verbally, send it to me in email, please, so you have it in writing. Once the PA window opens, we will shift to focus on PA questions. So you can, when we release the RFA, you will see all of the requirements for both the OAs and the PAs. You will be able to download the RFA so you can start working on those pieces, but you won't have access to actually start inputting the PA pieces yet. You will be able to submit questions, which we will answer during that window under the PA. Again, only written responses will be binding. Will you go to the next? If there are questions for submittable use of their system, this is the submittable help, the help site and their hours. They've got a chat function, they've got a call me function, all that standard stuff. So if you have problems just with their system, that's where you go. If you have questions for JEO during the application process, you're still going to start with nbo.grants@nebraska.gov, and we will direct them or loop them in as we need. Will you go to the next slide? Okay. Very briefly, and some of this you guys have seen before, stage 1 is organizational applications. There is exactly one organizational application window. We're not doing this twice, just the one time. So if you want to apply for NBO funding, please submit your OA during this window. I don't want to have to say, sorry, can't do it. This focuses on the organization and its capacity, and we are looking to score to establish a risk level for your entity, for your organization. It is possible to score too low. If something comes in and there's just too much risk, we may have to decline. So I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm assuming that's not going to be the case, but it is possible. So I want to throw it out there. At the end of the organizational application screening and scoring process, we will publish to the website and however else Rachel deems is appropriate and necessary, a list of approved applicants. And then you will be able to go in and your OA will link to your PA in submittable, and you'll be able to work on your PA. Will you go to the next slide? Project applications, PAs, there may be more than one round. And the first round will be focused on priority projects. You can submit for other projects during round 1, but we're not going to score them until we get to round 2. So fair warning and heads up. You will do 1 PA per DPA, focused on project details. And the scoring is based on the criteria in IPv2. That scoring criteria will also be listed again in the RFA, so it'll be downloadable with everything else. We will pull all that together and give funding recommendations to NTIA for their approval.
Hey, Diane, could I interject just real quickly, just to be clear?
Yep.
Priority projects are defined terms. That is fiber to the home projects. And I think what Diane was commenting on is in round 1, our focus will be on fiber to the home projects, or quote unquote priority projects. However, that doesn't limit or prevent folks non-fiber for submitting on a project. Those will be taken up in round 2 as we look at them. But I just wanted to be clear the delineation between priority projects and all other projects.
Thank you. So this is a first a couple of slides about a checklist for your OAs, things you can do to start prepping. This is not exhaustive. This is not everything, but it is some of the key pieces. And this is in a one-page sheet that I believe Rachel is also going to post to the website after the town hall. So you will be able to grab it in both ways. You don't have to take pictures or write frantically. The OAs, the first piece of it will be organizational information. So your UEI and the name that's registered with it at sam.gov, contact person, your average annual budget, your accounting system, fiscal year, that kind of stuff. This is also your legal address. How do we get a hold of you if we have questions or need something? That kind of stuff. So this is all of those fun, basically, how do we get a hold of you stuff. We go to the next. Then the next piece is organizational capacity. Again, this is not exhaustive. So licensing information, disclosure of investigations, indictments, judgments, litigation termination for cause, failures to file documentation. I'm assuming everybody's going to say, nope, we've had none of that. None of it's a problem, but I have to ask the question. That's part of the rules. Policies and procedures, do you have them? Do you not have them? So we know what we're walking into. Again, that's part of a risk assessment, experience with federal and state funding, etc. Will you go to the next? And attachments. So if you want to start pulling things together, documents we're going to need, things like your certificate of good standing from the Nebraska Secretary of State, your SAM.gov profile, your certificate of organization and amendments, resumes for key personnel, audited financial statements. I know that's going to be the fun one. Yes, we need them for 2 years. We don't need them for 12 years, just 2, please. Organizational charts, this kind of stuff. Will you go to the next? Okay, so yep, Director Haggerty anticipated me on a couple of these. So the DPA is published early, as he said, to give everybody time to consider and plan, and we hope you're doing that. Requirements. I want to note that there is nothing in the OAs that is not required. We didn't add any stuff just to see if you guys would react to it positively. We didn't add any stuff just to entertain ourselves. It's all straight out of the BEAD-NOFO, 2 CFR 200, the subgrantee qualification guide from NTIA, and or our own IPv2. So I don't want anybody to think that we're adding extra stuff just for fun or just because we can. That's not how we function. That whole easy to work with thing and transparent that Director Haggerty talks about, this is all part of it. In the OA, you will see a lot of yes, no questions with caveats. So has this happened? If yes, explain it. If no, move to the next question. So it will automatically branch you if you say no, or yes in some cases. Anyway, so there's a lot of yes, no questions. We try to keep it as simple as possible so that this doesn't take you forever and 5 days to do. There will be, only with the OA process, a very brief, very limited curing window. So, oh, you forgot to upload your organizational charts. Okay, then when we go through and we do the screening, we say, hey, the organizational charts are missing. We will send you an email. We'll give you 48 hours to get them to us, to put them into the system. So we will reopen it for that. So that, again, that will be very brief and just at the OA stage. Will you go to the next? Tips. So as soon as we announce that this is open, please go into the submittable portal, set up your account, go in and start your OA. The system is going to save it every few seconds and you can start it, save it, and come back later to finish. Your data will be saved. So you don't have to do it all at one time. You can go in and play with it and look at it and whatever else you need to do. Get familiar with the system, the help library. I'm guessing, just because I've worked in federal grants for a long time, that people are going to work on this on the weekends when it may be harder to get hold of people from the help desk. So get familiar with that help library in case you need it. It's going to be a lot easier to do it before you have to have it. I assume you all know this, but I will reiterate. Prep and send your questions. As I said, we're going to pick our timing as far as responding to them, but prep them and send them. If you've got them, write them down, get them to us so we're aware. Download the RFA so you can see, again, I said all of the OA and the PA requirements plus the deadlines. Everything's going to be in that RFA. And then keep an eye on our FAQs. We are trying to pull out key pieces of information to make sure they're brought to your attention as we go. Will you go to the next? Okay, so here's where we're going to shift off and Patrick is going to stop sharing and I'm actually going to share and show you what this looks like. I am not going to give you every little piece of it. I'm just not. Let's see if I can get it to cooperate with me. Okay, can you see our homepage?
Yep.
Okay, so the plan here is to start here. You'll click on organizational applications, which I'm not going to do because it won't do me any good right now. It's not quite ready for you. But you will start on our homepage. You will click here and it will take you here, which looks a little different because we're in a testing phase. So it will say, you know, welcome. Hey, we're glad you're here. Please, let's start your OA. So it will start with eligibility questions. We don't have a lot of absolute, sorry, you can't play. You know, I said it is possible to score too low. This is one spot where it's possible to score too low. If you say yes, that you are presently debarred, suspended, proposed for any, if the answer to this first question is yes, you can't play. You can't participate in NB. This is a federal rule. I have no control over it. So if you say yes, fair warning and heads up, that's what's going to happen. It will say, unfortunately, you can't participate. Have a nice day, basically. You tell it no, and then it goes into the other two eligibility pieces, which are you need to be one of these types of entities, which should be pretty broad. So I'm guessing everybody's going to fall into one of those pretty easily. And you must have this capacity. You've got to be registered with the Secretary of State. You've got to have a SAM.gov registration, et cetera. So then you're going to say the above applies to our group. You're going to make sure you've said no up here. And then you're going to hit next. And it's going to take you right into the first set of questions. So again, I'm not going to walk through all of these, but this is just it. We tried to make this as simple and straightforward as possible. This first batch of questions is really more putting in your information. We don't get into the yes, no's until we get a little further down. And I apologize if I'm making anybody dizzy scrolling here. I do want to show you selection of your DPAs. On the OA side, we are asking you to tell us which DPAs you are interested in, and you can pick as many as you want at the OA stage. We just want a heads up who's interested in what where, so that we have an idea of where we may have challenges down the road. So you can tell us all if you want to, or you can pick however many you want, but all 33 of them are listed here. And we tried to give you the name of, or the designation, the alphanumeric designation of the DPA, plus the counties it covers. So you have an idea of where it is in the state if you're not, you know, if that's helpful. So
just to be clear, folks, this is non-binding. We're just trying to collect some pre-information to know where the interest lies and quite frankly, where it doesn't lie.
Yeah, if you decide you want to work in the panhandle, you tell us in the OA, and it comes to the PA time and you tell us, nope, it's just Lancaster County, so be it, no problem. Just give us a heads up. That's all this is for. You're also going to tell us what kind of technology you're planning across most of those DPAs, whatever you, again, not binding, but just to give us a heads up so we kind of know what we're looking at. So as I said, this system saves every few seconds, so you don't have to worry about that. However, okay, I'm going to scroll all the way to the end really fast. So if that makes you dizzy, close your eyes. You can scroll all the way to the bottom and hit save draft if you feel you need to at any time. Otherwise, the system does automatically save every few seconds. So there are 7 sections to the OA, as I said. We looked at the organizational information, organizational capacity. This is where we start getting into yes, no's. If the answer is no, then we just go to the next question. If the answer is yes, then it's going to say, please give us an explanation. That's where that starts. Again, I apologize for scrolling. Hope I'm not making you dizzy. There's nothing again here that should be a surprise to anybody. It's all in the rules and the requirements. So this is table 2 or piece 2 of this is really about your experience with other grants programs. Then we get into attachments. This is where you're just going to drop all of your SAMS.gov profile, your Secretary of State, your certificate of organization, all of that stuff. You're just going to upload those files. There are no file size limits with submittable, and I've seen their list of file types, and it's pretty extensive. So pretty much anything you decide to drop in here, you can. Please be kind to us. Don't make it any bigger. Don't make the files any bigger than they have to be, and don't give us anything else other than what we ask for, because if you submit it, we have to look at it, and sometimes that's painful. So, sorry. Then we get into certifications. A lot of this is going to be simply check the box. If there's a question at the end of these, I know there's a lot here, and some of these are not going to be fun, but these are all requirements, and none of these, again, should be a surprise. But if you have anything that you cannot certify, then you have an opportunity to explain it down here, and we will figure out what that means as we move forward and if we're going to be able to move forward. Also, if you say, yeah, I can certify that, but I still want to say something about it, then go for it. Put it in here. That's what the text box is for. Explain whatever you need to explain. Section 5 gets into cybersecurity and supply chain risk management, all of those fun things. So there you go, more attachments, more things for your checklist. And then ownership disclosure. This is again from the BEAD NOFO. We've got to have it. So pieces for that. And then the last piece of this is your other public funding. If you haven't received other public funding for this, then you say no and you move on. If you say yes, then there's a spreadsheet you will fill out and upload. All of the documents, anything that's like that, that's a spreadsheet you need to fill out and upload for us, anything like that, we will have on our website, and you'll be able to grab it right from there, download it, fill it out, and put it into here. You won't have to create your own thing. You don't have to go looking hard for it. It'll all be in one place. When you're done with your OA, you hit submit. Now, I didn't put any answers in really, so every single question it's saying, hey, you're missing an answer. It will do this. It will take you back to the first place, the last place, I forget which, that you need you missed an answer or you didn't provide an answer. So you can, you will probably have to go back up to the beginning and scroll to catch all of the red, but at least it's in red and you should be able to see it pretty easily where you need to put in your answers. I'm going to stop sharing and I am going to open it for questions and answers at this point, because that is my brief walkthrough. Rachel, you and your team handling Q&A, is that how this is?
Yes, yeah, I will go through, there are quite a number of questions in the chat and we'll just start at the top and work our way through. So Dave asked if we are going to share the slides. Typically we share the recording of this town hall to our website. We are also going to share that checklist that Diane provided. We'll have that uploaded with the slides as well, or with the recording. I'm sorry, with the recording of the town hall. Josh from Sked asked that commented that he's surprised by the small number of BSLs in the tribal areas. Patrick Redmond, would you want to talk about why that is and how we came up with that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, we were deduplicating our programs. So there's, other programs such as like EACAM, for example, that are covering some of the other tribal locations. And we verified that with our data from NTIA. And they concluded the same that we did, that there were no eligible locations within those other tribal lands. So we ended up only having the small number between the Omaha and the Winnebago. So I mean, it's a great sign that those locations are getting built out and that NTA has certified that, those are under an enforcement commitment. So it allows us to focus our energies on the places that are not currently under any other programs or not currently being built out. So see it as a pretty good positive.
Yeah, I think maybe, Patrick, it's been helpful when I spoke to other groups to share that BEAD funding is available for the 29,000 locations that are currently unserved, underserved, and do not have another enforceable commitment behind them. In Nebraska, we have approximately 70,000 locations that are unserved and underserved. So if you just split those two, 40,000 of the 70,000 have an enforceable commitment behind them already and are built or will be built through that enforceable commitment.
Hi, this is Steve Mion. I'm supporting the Omaha tribe in their broadband projects. And I just have a question on that because when there are tribes that basically in the first round of the NTIA funding may not have gotten to the full speed capacities of the FCC. As an example, I think the existing one is going to be a 25.3 service until we can get grant funds to expand that service. Is there any consideration for that? Because there definitely are locations that will fall under the FCC guideline of 120 service. Even though it is showing, we also had to submit over, I believe, 275 challenges to the FCC prior to the map being released. And most of those locations were miscategorized from the beginning. So I don't know if there's any post analysis that can be performed with NTIA on, I think that'll probably come out in the reporting, but I just wanted to raise that because there may be, service locations that on the surface look like they are served, but actually don't meet the minimum standard from a broadband perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, we can sure talk offline. I appreciate you bringing that to light. I quite frankly, when I saw we had gotten down to just 14 locations, I was relatively surprised as well. But through a very complex vetting process, that's what we got to. But Steve, we can talk more offline. My concern is that our inventory is final. Like I said, the NTIA's direction to us was it will never grow, but it can shrink, so to speak. And so that would be a concern around those locations you're speaking of. But you can sure call me offline and we can have further conversation, just so if at minimum, I'm informed.
Yeah, that'd be great because we can get this to NTIA. This is not an uncommon issue that's specific to Nebraska. It's
Right.
happening across the entire country. So yeah, we definitely want to raise that because obviously if there's two NTIA funding rounds and service locations still did get missed, we just want to make sure that that's documented.
Perfect. Thanks again, Steve.
All right. The next question we have is, I understand your requirement of providing an application that covers 100%. I was wondering if ISPs have a mechanism that would allow the exclusion of certain BSLs that would have a significant impact on the application costs.
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. Rachel?
Yep, go for it.
Kevin, the intent is to have applications without conditions. In other words, the project area is applied for in its whole, in its entirety. In reality, I don't expect that we can make that a requirement. So I would only say, yes, conditions are acceptable. However, the scoring related to a condition will be less than the scoring related to a full project.
All right.
I think, why we talked a lot about this internally, and, I think there's going to be more applications that come with conditions around multiple project areas. In other words, if I'm not awarded this project area, I don't want to accept this other project area. And again, we'll accept them, but just recognize potentially in competitive applications, that condition is going to be result in a lower score than a condition, and then one that comes in without conditions.
And just to clarify, I want to note that that opportunity will be available not with the OA, but with the PA. So don't look for it at the OA stage.
We have some comments also. As providers are considering their workforce needs, please reach out to the American Job Centers to help coordinate with you for talent acquisition. Thank you for that. Rick also was asking about the other tribal nations and the DPAs. I think we've covered that. Rick, if you still have questions, put it down in the bottom and we'll hit it again. Let's see. Can we apply for all fiber and a fiber fixed wireless application for one project area?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if I understand the question, Ashley, in other words, a project area may be bid on fiber for 70% of it, and the other remaining 30% of it is proposed to be fixed wireless in this example, in this question. Yes, that's acceptable, but again, if there is a full fiber application competing against an hybrid application, the full fiber is going to score significantly higher based on the prioritization of fiber.
Do you mind if I chime in real quick? Hi. I was just wondering, can we submit more than one application for a project area? So say we've got a all fiber application, but we've also got an application that has like a fiber and fixed wireless play to give you options to evaluate if maybe the cost for us to do the full fiber application doesn't fit the parameters of what you're looking to do in that area. And
yeah, acceptable. That's acceptable, Ashley.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure
based on the NOFO and the prioritization of fiber, if there were the fiber is going to score higher. I guess I just leave it at
Yes,
that.
yeah, yes. It's just whether the cost of it affects it when you've got those outliers. We want to make sure we're including what you guys are asking us for as far as 100% coverage, but also want to be realistic about what we're able to make happen. So
Yeah, no, that's fair. Good question, Ashley.
All right, our next question is from Pam Adams. If a DPA is not continuous but broken up across a geography, do you need to serve all BSLs if you are not in all parts of the DPA? Director Haggerty, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think we've answered that, Pam. Applications with conditions are going to score less than applications, comprehensive applications, but conditions are acceptable. So if Pam, in this example, you were to bid on L61, but there were 10 locations in L61 that were non-contiguous to the other, you could sure condition that within the application. I think part of the conversation that I've had with others around that potential, that potential approach is that we've really designed these DPAs, optimized the DPAs to where the good offsets the bad. In other words, back to my example of, there's 150 locations, 10 of them aren't as palatable as the other 140. We would hope the 140 that are very palatable offset the 10 that aren't, if that makes sense or is helpful.
All right, another question for you, Director Haggerty, from Stacy Hartman. When will the window for the OA and PA be available?
We haven't noticed that yet, Stacy, but it's going to be soon, and it's going to be quick. So that's why we're trying to get, in terms of the DPAs, get those in front of you early. So a lot of legwork can be done prior to that opening, but it will be soon.
Rhonda Patino asked, will you have an application guide that displays all of the questions that the OA will have that we can reference and start prepping narratives for the questions? Maybe Diane, can you answer that?
Yeah, that is on my list of things to develop, and it is in process. So it will be published as soon as we can get it done.
Great. Kevin McGuire asked, for the funding question, is there any funding or just funding for in the DPAs we are considering?
I'm assuming that refers to the question about other public funding, that last piece of the OA. And assuming that's true, it will be any funding specific to broadband infrastructure development across the country, either in Nebraska or in another state, or both. And that is right out of the BEAD NOFO. So
another question for you, Diane. Will the cybersecurity and supply chain policies need to be uploaded with the OA? If so, will those be treated confidentially?
Yes, those plans will need to be uploaded with the OA. There is a piece in the RFA that describes how you can submit things, proprietary or confidential information. However, the submittable system is secure. It is only accessible if you have an account, and there are levels of accessibility. So for example, I can get in and pretty much do whatever I want, whenever I want, but individuals outside of broadband office, aside from me, basically, or the submittable people themselves, really can't. You're gonna be limited what you can see and what you can do based on your account setup. So it is a secure system. We will treat things confidentially. We're not gonna pull this stuff down and print it or publish it or any of that stuff. So yes.
Thank you. Ebony Cooksey asked, I would like to confirm tribal consent will be accepted in the form of signed letters or printed email confirmation, or will there be a designated form to complete?
I'm not planning a designated form. I can offer a template if one would be helpful. I know each tribe does things in their own way, and I don't want to impinge on that. Robin, Madison, you have something to say?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna jump in and say that the NOFO states it needs to be a tribal resolution. And so what we've seen in some of those early states is a tribe actually has a resolution. And if it's like a one, you know, it's one page, it's signed by their tribal council. That is what we're going to be looking for when Nebraska submits. So I would say if a tribe is struggling with an example of a tribal resolution, NTIA can certainly, you know, direct them to make some examples, but it should be a formal tribal resolution rather than an email or
Yep.
a letter.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that response. Thanks.
And I will note, for those of you who don't know Robin, tell me if I get this wrong, you are the regional coordinator for NTIA on BEAD, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, I know Tom Rolfes is usually on. Tom had a conflict today, so I'm listening in, and I'm delighted to hear all the questions and the great summary. So good work, everyone.
Thanks, Robin. Our next question is from Leanne with SCED. I would be concerned as an impartial regional advocate, not an ISP, that any BSLs could even be considered as excluded in an application. This would seem to defeat the purpose of BEAD funding and the NBO goal to serve all. Then how or whom would circle back to ever serve those BSLs after BEAD is over? Director Haggerty, can you address that, please?
Yeah, no, and I think it's a valid concern, Leanne. At the end of the day, simply put, we have to inform NTIA that every one of the locations in our inventory is going to be served. So most likely, if we were to in the I guess least wanted type of application would be we get one application for a project, a defined project area that has a condition to serve only 90% of them. We would have an opportunity to then begin negotiating with how to get that remaining 10% served. So I think in simplest terms, everybody's going to get served, Leanne. It just may take some additional steps in the process to make that happen should we be limited to one application with conditions.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear, that negotiations would take place, because I would think the BEAD mandate states that you have to serve them. So if you don't get it served by this ISP, then who is going to serve them if it's a little patchwork of a few people missed, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, no, when we submit our final proposal to NTIA, our files have to indicate the application of every one of those locations. In other
and
words,
as a regional advocate and partnering with ISPs, we want to do letters of recommendation, and you can be sure that we're not going to recommend a project that is skipping over people.
Right, right.
That we're going to do our due diligence working with county leadership that all are indeed served.
Yeah, and we really attempted to minimize that potential circumstances by creating DPAs that, yes, have locations that aren't contiguous or are remote to the density areas, but we're hoping the density areas, based on how we applied the optimization tool, offset the high cost associated with the small number of locations that aren't contiguous to the density.
I think we had another raised hand. Somebody, if they want to unmute.
Hey, Patrick, this is Kevin Sievert
Hey,
with
Kevin.
Alex. So I want to push back on that a little bit, right? As far as the internet for all. The internet for all is not a requirement of the final proposal. It's not a requirement of the BEAD program. It's a goal, and it's a noble goal. I completely understand it. But the very fact is there are many states that do not have enough information, do not have enough money to build out the internet to every one of the BSLs. Okay. And so, so Nebraska is in a pretty good situation, but I did want to address one of the reason I asked the question about kind of having those narratives of maybe taking out some very high cost locations, right? And just very quickly, there could be, those one or two locations that are 5 miles down the road that it just doesn't make sense to to essentially build out to. And the state has the opportunity to basically say, okay, those are going to be ones that we are going to allocate to a satellite provider, and then maybe try and negotiate that some other way. And so I just want to make sure that, you know, that all of those things and all of that negotiation is part of it. And there's a lot of levers to pull and buttons to push that the state can do. And I think, you know, to your point, Nebraska has, you know, has enough money to do that. But even in Louisiana and Nevada, there were BSLs that no one wanted. No ISP provider provided an application, even after the state broadband office has begged, borrowed, and steal, you know, to try and get people to bid on it. And those are the ones that were just allocated to satellite. And so we might have situations like that in Nebraska. And I just want to set everybody's expectation that, you know, there might be a situation in which, you know, in an area where 99% of the locations are going to get fiber, there might be those 2 or 3 that have been pulled out that are going to go for satellite, just because it doesn't make business sense, you know, CapEx or OpEx to serve, you know, some of those BSLs in the areas.
Yeah, that's good clarity, Kevin. I appreciate that. I was not getting that far into the weeds, but you're right. The mandate is to get to all unserved locations as the priority. We in Nebraska, as we've shared with all of you, believe we have funding to get to our unserved and underserved locations, which is why our DPAs reflect both. But to your point, Kevin, there's a round of negotiations that occur. That's not our mindset here at NBO. We're hoping it runs cleaner than that. But at the end of the day, as a prioritized technology, low orbit satellites are an option. So I appreciate that, Kevin.
All right. We have a few more questions. We are at the top of the hour, so we'll try to answer these last few questions. Ashley asked, have you all considered deobligation for any served non-BSLs that may be in the data? Director Haggerty, I think that's kind of your...
Yeah, that's back to the part of the agenda I spoke to earlier. Those would fall under one of the exception codes, and we would submit those as part of our file at the end of the project. So I think, you know, there is one of the examples of exceptions I shared was in a location that was showing as unserved or underserved, but actually in fact was served. But there's an exception code, for example, for what in our fabric appeared to be an address and actually turned out to be a rock. So that list of exception codes is pretty extensive in attempting to address all of those exceptions. Ashley.
Thank you. Sorry, I hopped on a little late, so I must have missed that part. Just appreciate it. Some states are not taking that guidance, so grateful to hear that you all are. Thank you.
Yep.
See, Aaron asked, back to talent acquisition, it would be helpful for us to know the skills needed since we can tap into funds for training and eligible people to be ready to connect to occupations you need to hire.
I think how I'd answer that, Aaron, is I've said this publicly a lot. I think probably one of the weaker aspects of our proposal thus far has been our talent acquisition opportunity. So Aaron, I would invite a call into the office and talk to us about what that looks like and what we can be doing to support and invest in what you described there. I think, you know, the fortunate part is that in terms of the study that I saw was that we were lacking about 8% of what they felt we needed in terms of construction resources as it related to this program. That's much significantly lower than a lot of other states that I've seen, but there still obviously is a need there. But Aaron, we would love to hear from you more independently on what your thoughts are with that.
I'll definitely reach out. Thank you for that response.
Sure.
Thank you, Aaron. Al Schroeder asked, how will the grant payments be made? Are there major milestones or a proposed schedule? Diane, can you take that?
Yep. So grant payments will be made quarterly based on submission of reports that we will describe in the RFA and the other documents. There are some there will be major milestones that have to be met. That's one of the requirements from NTIA is that we set up a milestone schedule. and track you guys against it, or track the projects against it, I guess is better phrasing. So that will be a part of it, but that will not necessarily be tied directly to payments. That's not the plan at this point. There are some details about that in IPv2 if you want to dig into that a little bit more, but I can also post an FAQ.
Thank you. And the last question we have, capital if, a provider is obligated to provide service to a tribal community using EACAM, CAF, or other federal funding, would they have a requirement to have a tribal consult to seek permission to do so? This is similar to your comments to seek approval from tribal nations to apply BEAD dollars to a project. So that's coming from Rick. Director Haggerty, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I think, Rick, that falls under the comment that was made earlier that each tribe may have a different process, but ultimately per NTIA, we're required to have a resolution, which usually requires the tribal council to approve that in a formal procedure. And that's what we'd be looking for.
To jump in specifically, Rick, that is something to work out with the provider and the entity that runs that program. So in the case of EACAM, I would contact that federal entity. Well, we have no jurisdiction over EACAM or any of the other
I'm
federal
sorry,
programs.
maybe I misread the question.
No,
Yeah.
your answer is still good.
The requirement of consent is specific to BEAD. I can't speak to EACAM or CAF. I don't know what the requirements in either of those two programs are as it relates to activity on tribal lands.
And that wraps up our questions for our Q&A. So, Patrick Redmond, did you have anything else to share with us?
Yeah, I will go ahead and sign us off then. Thank you guys all so much for joining us on this wonderful Friday morning. It's great to see you all. Like I said at the top of the hour, I haven't seen you guys since last year, so hopefully we don't spend too much time away. And I look forward to seeing you guys at our next town hall. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your guys' day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.